Today I am bringing you 10 queer books that I think you should be reading for Pride Month, but also all year round. 5 of them are fiction, 5 of them are non-fiction. I've tried to go as broad as I can, and all of these are on my bookshelf. There'll be a lot of other queer books that I've read that I don't own. For this video, I've decided to stick with the books that I already own and to talk you through them. Now, like a lot of other queer people, I'm sure I have some complicated mixed feelings around Pride Month and I suppose the commercialization of Pride Month. I originally planned to make this video last year's Pride Month video, and then things got in the way and I was like, oh well, I'll just make a concept video of like, these are some books that you could be reading in Pride Month, but you could also and should also be reading year long. And then I didn't make the video at all. It has now been a year, almost. I have handpicked 10 books from my bookshelf that I have enjoyed that are queer or have heavily queer themes, and hopefully there will be something in here for everyone to enjoy. Although a lot of my books do tend to lean more towards horror or literary fiction, I've tried to go for a bit of a range, but we'll just have to see. So I'm going to start off with fiction, starting off very strong with Here Again Now, and this is a book by Okechukwu Nuzela. I've talked about this book a few times now, but particularly in my Black British Literature TBR video, I talked about reading one of his other books and how this book is just so beautiful and became like almost an instant favorite upon reading it. This is his second book and it is just so beautiful and heartbreaking. Definitely a bit of a darker, sadder read, so if that's not your vibe, then probably not for you. Our main character is Echike, who is an aspiring actor living in Peckham who's just about to hit his big break, and he's convinced his aging father to move into his flat with him so he can kind of offer him a home the same way that his father took care of him as a child. And this is very much kind of like a queer acceptance novel, but also talks a lot about grief and family and how to piece yourself back together after something tragic happens. I don't want to say anything more without spoiling it, but it is truly such a beautiful book. Zelu writes with just so much joy and soul and depth, and truly worth a read, but definitely a bit more of a serious, meditative book, but I would highly recommend it for those of you who like queer Black British fiction. It's just amazing. Moving to something very different is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone and Amal El-Mutar. How do I explain this tiny book? This one is definitely a bit more popular, but when I was looking through my bookshelves, I thought, I can't not include this one. It is a sci-fi time travel sapphic love hate story. This is not going to be for everyone either. People, I think, either love or hate this book. It is very confusing. A lot of people find it much too convoluted to be enjoyable, but I think it's one of those that A, is worth a reread, and B, is kind of something that you let go of the details a little bit and try and enjoy the overarching story once you get a hold of what the overarching story actually even is. But this is about 2 rival agents who come from 2 different factions in a world in which you can time travel, and they're constantly trying to one-up each other and are leaving these notes and letters to each other in all of these different places and times in the world. And it is a very confusing ride at first, but I promise you, if you stick with it, it's great. And I think about this book often. I think about how much I need to reread this book. So if you want a bit of like a mind fuck, a bit of sci-fi, time travel, gay, spy, evil, hate, love, hate, relationship thing, go for it. This is the one for you. I've just realized I can't count. I have 11 books for you, and I have 6 fiction, 5 non-fiction. So the third one that we have is Private Rites by Julia Armfield. I became a huge Julia Armfield stan last year. I'd never read any of her books before, but her other book, Our Wives Under the Sea, had been on my radar for years, and I'm just mad that I didn't read it earlier. But Private Rites came out last year? No, but Private Rites is her book from 2024, and I think if we're going to be talking about maximizing the pride element, Private Rites is the one to go for. I almost suggested Our Wives Under the Sea, but I think that this has more of a wider appeal. This story follows 3 sisters who come back into each other's lives after their father dies, and they have to deal with his estate and also his legacy, as he has become a very famous architect in an apocalyptic world. Yeah, post-apocalyptic. I think it's actively going through the apocalypse in a world basically in which it does not stop raining. The climate has been fucked, and he invented architecture that meant houses could be built on stilts, and those who had access to the wealth were able to basically keep their houses on top of stilts whilst everyone else was submerged in water. It's interesting because the world is never fully directly explained. It's very much something that's set in the background. The story does not focus on the fact that they are living in an apocalyptic world or how things have changed. literally, but has become very much exploring that through how people's relationships have changed and people's priorities and the way that people continue to thrive or just survive in an apocalyptic world. But there are lesbians in this book, there's a non-binary character in this book who I think has done really well, and it's about legacy and family trauma and something else that I'm not going to talk about for fear of spoilers. But if you're a fan of speculative fiction, horror fiction, the horror isn't hugely present in this novel. I'd say it's more like an undercurrent of something is not right. And this is also a retelling of King Lear. So if you're into that, then check out Private Rites by Julia Armfield, and check out all of her other books too. Salt Slow, also great, genuinely one of the best short story collections that I have ever read. I think there was like one story in there that I didn't love, and the rest of them I was like, yeah, this is amazing. For more lesbians, we're going to go into Hungerstone by Kat Dunn, following on this kind of horror strain, but more in the strain of gothic horror. Hungerstone is a retelling of Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmilla. Set in the Peak District, we're following Lenore, who is the wife of a... I've talked about this book before, I'm getting so confused. Oh, it was my tier listing video. Anyway, Lenore is a unsettled wife of a terrible man, a steel worker, and they've been somewhat happily married for the past 10 years, but their relationship is starting to crumble as Lenore is unable to provide a baby. And they buy this massive manor house in the Peak District, and they are preparing the house for a big party until one day there is a carriage accident near Lenore's house, and Carmilla shows up. And this is a great sapphic novel about desire and restraint and repression. Some really beautiful landscape writing in here. I loved the character development. If you like vampires and you like lesbians, you're probably going to like Hungerstone. The next one is absolutely going to be on everyone's list, but I can't not include it, and it's The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Here is my beaten up old copy from, I think, 10 years ago now. The Song of Achilles is beautiful, and if you have not read it yet, I don't know what you're doing. This is genuinely one of those books that I recommend to almost everyone, no matter what they ask for. There's very few people that I wouldn't recommend The Song of Achilles to. I just think it is such an easy, beautiful read that is really accessible, but has its own style and has an interesting story that a lot of people still recognize due to it being a retelling of the Iliad from Achilles' right-hand man, Patroclus. And kind of the coming of age, love, war story, just so beautifully written. You can tell that Madeline Miller loves these characters, loves this story, and did her research and knows what she's talking about. And such a lyrical, smooth, kind of lilting writing style. At the same time, Madeline Miller is great at writing these really hard, impactful war scenes, these action scenes that are brutal and gory and realistic when it comes to what would have happened in the Trojan War. So yeah, even if you're not really a fan of mythological retellings, I would still recommend giving this one a go. It is not too difficult to get into. You don't need to know an entire host of different mythological figures in order to understand what's going on. It's very pivotal around Achilles and Patroclus. There you go. I would really recommend The Song of Achilles all the time, every time. The last fiction book that we have, because I can't count and we have 6, is Concerning My Daughter by Kim Kye-jin. I think this has now been turned into a movie or a TV show, a miniseries maybe. I'm not actually sure. I feel like I saw that this is being adapted. But I picked this book up very much on a whim, didn't know anything about it. I was really getting into Korean translated feminist fiction, and I saw this one and I was like, oh, it's gay. This one is a really interesting and a little bit of a difficult read because it is told from the perspective of a mother who lets her 30-something-year-old daughter move back into her apartment. She moves back in with her girlfriend. So it's grappling from the perspective of a homophobic mother, essentially. However, a mother who does seem to love her daughter very much and only want the best for her daughter. So it grapples with a lot of ideas of tradition, cultural tradition, and family values, whilst still being quite empathetic towards the daughter. And it kind of follows along this parallel storyline as the care home that the mother works at is demanding her to essentially neglect a patient who has no family. The mother begins to realize that just because you've not chosen a traditional path of life does not mean you do not deserve a good life where people love you. So it's an interesting story of kind of growth and acceptance, but I think it really forces you to become a bit uncomfortable with the perspective that you're reading from and to read from someone that you disagree with, but who you can still empathize with. So it's an interesting, challenging read, but very short, and I'm always interested to see kind of queer fiction from this side of the globe and to see how this intersects with family drama and cultural traditions. Basically, it's something I'm super interested in. So that is my last recommendation for the fiction side. Moving on to non-fiction. The first one I have, right, it doesn't have anything queer on the cover. It is not explicitly queer in its advertising, but to me this cannot be anything other than a queer book. And it is Disability Intimacy, Essays on Love, Care and Desire, and it is a collection of essays, thoughts, poetry put together by the late Alice Wong. It essentially explores intimacy when you're disabled in all of its shapes and forms, and I think the intersection between disability and queerness is something that is statistically goes hand in hand quite often. It felt strange not to have this on the list. Although I didn't love every part of this book, like you can see that I resonated with the beginning part more than the other. This has contributions from a lot of queer people talking about the different ways to care for people, to be intimate with people who are disabled, or how they love and take care of people when they're disabled themselves. But there are segments of this book that I really resonated with, and I think there's just a huge range of different people talking about ways of desiring and being in love and caring for people, that it's a good read if you want to learn more perspectives, hear from more perspectives, and also just to feel a bit more connected to community. The next one I have is We Both Left in Pleasure, The Selected Diaries of Lou Sullivan. This is a tough one. I'm not going to pretend this is not a tough one. You need to brace yourself for this one, especially if you're transmasculine. Lou Sullivan is probably one of the most significant trans figures in the 20th century. Talked often about the ability to live and die as a man. He sadly died of AIDS in 1991, and really it is what it says on the front. It is a collection of his diaries from when he was a child all the way through to 1991 once he had transitioned, and a lot of it just resonates so deeply with me, even though this is reading from a guy born in the 1950s. He is just someone who is very easy to read, to empathize with, and it's fascinating to be reading from a historical lens as well, how he was perceived and how he lived his life and how he found community and love and care despite everything that he was going through at the time. But yeah, definitely a bit of a rough one. As you can see, I liked a lot of things in here and I just realized I'm not sure if I can show this cover. Anyway, hopefully YouTube doesn't get upset about butts. Pretty sure it's a statue. There's artistic nudity. Definitely worth a read if you're interested in kind of trans history in America and understanding who Lou Sullivan was, but definitely a bit of a heavier one. The second nonfiction book I have is Transitional by Munroe Bergdorf. This is such a bright book. Whoa. For those of you who don't know who Munroe Bergdorf, she is an amazing trans author, activist, and model. Following her on Instagram, I knew that she was great at writing. She has such an amazing way with words that really get you to just kind of lock in, like very accessible writing that doesn't feel too boring or unengaging. So when I heard that she was coming out with a memoir, I knew that I wanted to get it. And understanding her background better and learning more about how she grew up and became the person that she is today was a super interesting read, and also incredibly well-informed, well-researched. I think she weaves together personal anecdotes and wider statistics and the wider reality of being trans in the UK. She's also amazing talking about the intersection of being trans and being black in the UK and just race in general. So if you're looking for something that also explores that, this is a good one to go for. Next up is The Transgender Issue, An Argument for Justice by Shawn Fay. If you've never read a Shawn Fay book, please go and read her. She is amazing. I feel like she's quite in the same vein as Munroe Bergdorf. Even as a trans person, reading this book felt very educational, very fulfilling. I don't know how to explain this, but sometimes if you're reading a non-fiction book about part of the community that you're in, it can feel a little bit like either you're being preached at or you're being told information that you already know because it is part of your lived experience. And of course you know that. You've learned that through just existing. Despite me knowing probably most of the information in this book when I first read it, I didn't feel bored. I didn't feel like I was being talked down to. It is just a really compelling read. I would always buy this book for people in your life. You're maybe trying to teach more about diversity and also trans people and how we are not these big scary monsters that people seem to think we are. It's a really good beginner's book that is still not disengaging or boring for those who do know more about being trans. And what I like is that Shawn Fay often examines a lot of the wider perspectives and the wider context of being trans and how that changes depending on what class you are, what race you are, what country you're born into. A lot of kind of these wider intersectional struggles and why everyone should be caring, why a trans issue is not just a trans issue. The only criticism is not the correct word, but the only thing I will say about this book now is that it was published in 2021, 5 years ago. Unfortunately, some of the information is not correct anymore, and I think it has quite like a hopeful tone to it about, in particular, the politics around being trans in the UK getting better. Unfortunately, it has not got better. And Sean Faye, I went to see her speak for her book Love in Exile, which is another book I considered putting on this list, but I'm going to stick with the transgender issue for now. But on her book tour for Love in Exile, she did discuss how, unfortunately, it feels like things did not get better as she had hoped for and written about in the transgender issue. So maybe it might be a bit bittersweet to be reading this from a 2020s perspective where we hoped things would get better, but alas, they did not. Absolutely great read. Even if you're perhaps not into political non-fiction, I think it's just something that everyone should read at least once in their lives. The last book I have is Pageboy, a memoir by Elliot Page. I was umming and ahhing about putting this one on the list, mainly because I felt like it is a very traumatic read. This is not an easy read. Elliot goes into quite a lot of depth about some of the terrible things that have happened to him, but what I think it provides is an interesting perspective on what it is to be famous and in Hollywood as a queer trans person and how that has impacted Elliot Page. I think they have a really great way of writing that engages you, and it doesn't just feel like Elliot Page is telling you his trauma. There is this undercurrent of hope and growth throughout the book, which is really encouraging to read about despite everything that he's gone through. Also, I guess if you're more into celebrity culture, it is just undeniably interesting to look into the film career and read deeper into how certain people are treated based on the way that they look, the way that they speak, the people that they actually want to be, and how much people have to repress themselves in order to keep their job, such high-profile public jobs as well. So, Pageboy, another difficult read. A lot of these are a little bit difficult, but I'm not really one for escapist literature, I guess. I read things because I want to learn or find out about a new perspective, particularly when it comes to nonfiction. So I'd recommend this, but check your trigger warnings for it. So there you go. Those are my Pride Month recommendations, but books that you should be reading all year round if you want to read more queer fiction and nonfiction. Obviously, knowing me, I have many more queer books on my bookshelf, but I handpicked these ones in particular because I feel like it has kind of a range. Sorry, I don't have more happy-go-lucky queer books, I suppose, but that's not really my thing. But I hope that this is helpful and it gives you some idea of where to spring from, or maybe a few more books to add to your TBR if you're already a fan of queer fiction. If anyone has any recommendations, please feel free to drop them down below. I'm always looking for more book recommendations, particularly if they're queer and particularly if they're horror. So if there's any other horror fans out there who like queer horror, give me the recommendations. I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.